Welcome to track 1. It is 10 o'clock, 9:59, but we're starting a little bit early. Our next speaker is Scott Schober. Is that correct? Yeah, using that degree. And Scott is the CEO of Berkeley Varitronics Systems. He is the president and CEO out of New Jersey. Oh, welcome. And he does world-class wireless test and security solutions. He is the author of 3 best-selling security books: Hacked Again, Cybersecurity is Everybody's Business, and Senior Cyber. Scott is a highly sought-after author and expert for live security events, media appearances, and commentary on the topics of ransomware, wireless threats, drone surveillance, and hacking. Cybersecurity for consumers and small businesses. No big deal. That's a lot. He is often seen on ABC News, Bloomberg TV, Al Jazeera America, CBS This Morning News, CNN, Fox Business, and many other networks. Scott also serves as the CSO and chief media commentator for Cybersecurity Ventures and sits on several cyber advisory boards for various companies. So I welcome Scott to the stage.
How you guys doing there? And I should mention, I think I'm supposed to mention at the end, we're doing a little book signing out in the hallway there, so you can get a copy of my book, a complimentary copy there, thanks to CornCon. I really appreciate them having me come out here. I know it's a smaller crowd, but that's okay. If you do have any questions while I'm talking, just feel free to just put your hand up there, and I'm happy to try to answer the best of I can, or get to the answers later on, so that way it can be a little bit interactive, especially as a smaller group there. Now today, what I'm going to be trying to talk about is skimmers. And it's kind of a problem in the world of cybersecurity that not that many people talk about. In fact, a few years ago, as I started to learn about skimmers, and the more and more I heard about them, and I started doing research about them, writing about them, and understanding how effective they are, it opened my eyes up to a lot of different things. And I think that's kind of an interesting starting point. When we just think about cybersecurity in general, how much damages that there actually are, and certainly skimmers, the topic we're going to talk about a little bit here, how much that makes up in damages, in credit card fraud and things each and every year. It's amazing. So just to kind of set the stage, jump there just to the first slide. I just want you to think about this. This is really to put it in perspective. Cybercrime damages will cost the world $6 trillion by 2021. That's a lot of money. Here we are in 2021. I had the privilege here, some of you guys may have watched that show Shark Tank or whatever, Robert Herjavec. He's got a really cool company, Herjavec Group, up in Toronto. I was up there for a particular event, but this was another occasion. I got to sit down and interview him for about a half hour and kind of just ask him some different questions and get his pulse on the industry of cybersecurity. They do a couple $100 million a year, so they're heavily invested, especially with a lot of the stuff with the Sony breach and other breaches where they're very instrumental. And it was, when I brought up this statistic, I asked him the question about the damage of cybersecurity. And he thought that number was actually conservative and it was much worse. So again, it speaks to how bad of a cybersecurity problem there actually is out there with all these compromises. And that kind of sets the stage thinking about skimmers. Skimmers are a multi-billion-dollar industry stealing our credit cards, commonly from any type of retail point-of-sale terminal. In the United States, gas pumps are targeted hugely, and of course ATMs. So pretty much any bank, and we're not just talking United States, but really globally, they're very effective. And there's different types of skimmers, and I'll talk about some of the different things and show you a couple of different pictures from some of the research I've done and some of the tools that we've actually developed in our company. And just as a short background, more on the technical side, who am I, what am I? I'm not just here speaking about the problems and things. We have a company I run, and we develop wireless threat detection tools. So we do research, we find problems in the industry, we actually provide solutions. Most of our solutions are hardware, some software, but most hardware that we provide to DoD agencies. In this particular case for skimmers, we actually develop skimmer detection tools. So we have to actually understand how skimmers work, how to find them, and how to get them out of whatever they're placed in. And I'm also part of the Skimmer Task Force on National Weights and Measures, so I work with them sharing knowledge, training from different groups, everything from FBI, Secret Service, and local law enforcement as well. So I had to go out and make sure I'm trained, understand how to visually spot skimmers, how they're hidden inside gas pumps, for example. Spent a day down in Florida, learned a lot, and then taught a lot as well as a result, just to give you a little bit of context and background, which I think is always important there. Now, just to kind of high level, what are some things that we'll talk about here? What are skimmers, the types of skimmers, the different methodology in installing them effectively, how cyber criminals do this, how are some things, practical things that we can do to stay safe, and then also talk a little bit about the dark web. I'll get into that. I won't dive into any of this real deep and technical unless you have a question or want to, I could try, but dark web more from a standpoint of how is this information that's stolen actually sold? Because that's where most of the stuff is going on, is in the dark web there. So we'll dive into that a little bit as well. And again, as a reminder, just put your hand up there and yell out if you have a question. It makes for a more lively discussion. Otherwise, I'm just going to be talking up here for now, trying to keep you guys all awake. Okay, so first of all, what are skimmers? Well, skimmers have been around for a number of years, ever since credit cards really took place. So they've been around for decades. We've heard about them, and then it kind of got quiet for a while. We didn't hear about them as much. Most of the time, when you hear about a skimmer, in the past, it was always something that would slide down the throat of where your credit card goes in. We're used to that, right? And what is a skimmer? A skimmer is basically a second magnetic head, a secondary read head that reads our credit card information. So that magnetic stripe on the back of your credit card, that second read head, it pulls off the track 1, track 2, CVV, all that information that tells them, hey, here's the credit card number, and so on and so forth. And that mag stripe information is what cyber criminals really are trying to get. They're trying to basically steal that off of our cards there. As things evolved, the wonderful world of wireless, things are more convenient now. We now hear about Bluetooth skimmers, and then there's also cellular skimmers. So basically, these are wireless skimmers, and again, it's a magnetic read head, and then it's coupled to a wireless module. Typically, Bluetooth is the most popular because it's ISM band, 2.4 gigahertz, fast frequency hopping, a level of security there, and it also allows the cyber criminal to have convenience. Think about that for a moment. If you're a bad guy and you go into a bank, what do? You got maybe your mask on, you got a gun, your getaway car outside, you have all these different things that you have that could kind of give away who you are and get caught. Now think about it in contrast. Let's think about a Bluetooth skimmer that you place, let's say inside of a gas pump. How would one go about doing such? Well, obviously you got to buy the Bluetooth skimmer. You just need some money for that. Anywhere from, I've seen them $600 to maybe $1,200 in the dark web. Actual cost in parts is probably about $30, $40. But they command a high price because they know a lot of these guys have stolen funds, and they can easily buy a lot of these skimmers. It becomes a business model on supply and demand. So they've used a couple common modules, typically these Bluetooth modules inside the Bluetooth skimmer. And how does it work? It's usually a simple microchip that's got a buffer and some memory in it. It's got a Bluetooth module in there that can now transmit the information. And there's a cable that, and you can see it in this picture here, to the right of my picture there. When you can plug that into the top of the point of sale terminal. So your card would normally go in, say in the gas pump, right? Your magnetic card will go in there. That cable plugs on top. So now the transaction will happen. You pull up to the gas station, and normally you would buy gas, you pay $50 for gas. The transaction would go through, but a copy of that information, the stolen credit card information off your mag stripe, would go into this buffer. And now it just stores it. It records a couple hundred of these stolen credit cards each day on each pump. And then what happens? The cyber criminal, obviously, once they have it placed in the machine, they never have to go back to the crime scene right there to get caught. They can stay within about 75-foot proximity is about what you'll get out of a typical good, well-placed Bluetooth module in a gas pump. So we kind of get a sense of how easy it is. They'll pull up a parking lot alongside the gas station with their laptop, and then they'll sync up with that Bluetooth module, and then they'll just download from each machine, each gas pump, all of those stolen credit cards. and then you later on use those to process online, sell, package. I can talk a little bit more about that. But that's the beauty of it. See how convenient it is. Now you probably are sitting there and saying, oh, well, gas pumps are locked, aren't they? Well, sure, that's what I thought too. How many keys do you think there are for gas pumps to get into it? This is about 90% of the million-plus gas pumps throughout the United States. You're pretty close. 5, 6 keys, generic keys. Isn't that scary? So you got 6 keys that you can get into all these pumps. Now, does that make any sense? It actually does from a convenience standpoint. So if you're a gas station attendant, you're the owner, you're the guy delivering the petroleum, if you're National Weights and Measures, you have to come in and actually verify the amount of dispensing. There's a lot of reasons that people need constant access. You got to change the paper that's printed out for the credit card receipt, and all of that's good and fine and legal. The problem is the cyber criminals realize, ooh, I can get inside the rat's nest there and just simply place a Bluetooth skimmer. So you go on eBay or dark web, and now you buy these 6 generic keys, about $15 to $20 I see them sold for. You're in business. Now you pull up, say, 2 a.m. at night at the gas station, no one's looking, the cameras are off, open up the door, you take your Bluetooth skimmer that you purchased, you plug it in the top, you close the door, you lock it, you leave. They provide power within the pump for you, you're in business. About 15 to 20 seconds, the average cyber criminal can put a Bluetooth skimmer in a pump. And a lot of the sting operations, law enforcement that I've talked to and worked with, the interesting thing is, as fast as they find the Bluetooth skimmers, take them out, report them, investigation, federal investigation, a lot of work, a lot of money. Law enforcement does a great job there. However, the next day, they'll be replaced again. It's that easy to put them in. So you see the common problem. I said to myself, well, this is stupid. Why don't you just change the locks? Change the locks, now you gotta have different keys. Everybody doesn't have access to the keys, and it becomes that locking key situation. So it becomes more of a physical security problem. And many people back away and hesitate from just simply switching over to doing that. So, and hence it makes big sense then why the problem is so prevalent. Now, there's a lot of different types of skimmers too. The old days, you see the little, kind of the green plastic that's somewhat translucent. It's outside of an ATM, it's very common. A lot of times they'll actually take a skimmer and they'll place it inside there, and these things are pretty small. I should have brought one with me so you can see it, but it's something that'll fit, between my 2 fingers here. Very small, a couple inches across. Small lithium battery there that's typically on there. They use a lot of hot glue to affix them to different surfaces, and then typically they'll actually print with a 3D printer, which is anybody could use that these days. They'll actually print their own bezels. They'll try to make them look a little bit more. They'll epoxy them on top of an older bezel. And that's more old school. What they'll do on an ATM, or it could be done on a gas pump. I've seen it that way. And again, they'll embed that circuit there. It could be a traditional skimmer, or it could be a Bluetooth skimmer as well there. It doesn't really matter. Now for ATMs, the interesting part is, if you think about it, if you're using a debit card, obviously on your mag stripe is your credit card data, your debit card data that they want to steal. They need one other magical ingredient. What is that?
Your PIN.
Your PIN, right? So how do they accomplish that? There they have to use a small little pinhole camera. And there, it's interesting because they'll place it in any spot that you really can't see. And oftentimes, if you look at the way an ATM is designed, to see where the pinhole cameras are, you have to really be a detective. You have to get down and look up underneath some of the spots at the angles. Wherever you see a little crack or crevice, that's a great spot where they tend to hide them. And sometimes they're actually, again, behind other fake bezels. I've seen them behind stickers where they just put a little pinhole where the camera, so they can do a lot of things to hide these cameras. What's the point of the whole camera? Again, so they can see your PIN code, 1, 2, 3, 4, that allows you to have access to your debit card and take the money out. And all they have to do now is correlate their little video with that of the stolen debit card information, put those together, your credit card information, and your PIN code. Now they can go in business. The difference is with a debit card, when they take the money, what happens? They take it out of your account immediately. So I always caution people, think about a debit card. There's advantages of a debit card. It's convenient. You go into any machine anywhere, you get money out. Maybe you pay $1 or $2 or $3, or by me, $4 or $5 sometimes for a fee. But you don't have the same liability protection that you do with a traditional credit card. In other words, traditional credit cards compromised, what happens? You call up your issuing bank, credit card company, I card was compromised. Mr. Schober, we'll shut it down, we'll send you a new card, you'll get it in a few days. What's your liability as a consumer? Anybody know? Please. $50, right? And 9 out of 10 times, and I've had my card compromised more than probably all of you combined, because I was targeted and hacked within my company and myself personally. Another story, I may talk about it later. The interesting thing is, if you call the bank and say, hey, I'm a loyal customer, come on, we'll waive the $50, Mr. Schober. Now, how about your debit card's compromised? Not the same thing. Again, they took $300 out of Mr. Schober's account. Now I gotta go fight to get that money back. Will I get it back? Probably, because the bank wants to work with me. Who pays for all this? Who pays for all this money that's stolen? A lot of people don't realize this.
The consumer?
We do, yeah. About 4% of all of the interest that's paid for these people that run up balances, don't pay their card on time, about 4% of that, which is bazillions of dollars, I don't even know how much money it is, a lot of money. That all goes just to fight credit card fraud and to fulfill claims and things like that with all these problems people getting in. So you start to see how big this problem is. Huge, billions upon billions of dollars. When there's an ATM, or let's just say a gas pump, that a skimmer's found, think about that for just a moment. What harm does that cause? Obviously, consumer credit card that goes in that pump. Each pump, usually they get about 200 to 300 cards a day around us. So you've got that issue. And then maybe there's skimmers in 3 or 4 of the pumps. And now you're talking 1,000 cards a day. Once they find the skimmer, they have to shut the pump off. They call it local law enforcement. It becomes a federal crime scene. So now federal has to be investigated. Time, money, cost. You start to see the problem. The average gas pump with a skimmer placed in it gets about $116,000 in stolen credit cards before they find it, on average. Now multiply that by, they're reporting thousands and thousands of skimmers being pulled out of machines in many different states. Florida, Texas, certain states are really bad. So you start to get a sense of how bad this problem really, really is. And we just need to be cautious. What can you do as a consumer? If you're pumping gas, let's say, to stay safe, getting your credit card skimmed. Please.
Visual check.
You can do a visual check, excellent. Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. So you've got an outside plastic bezel, you can jiggle it and see if somebody tampered with the machine, something doesn't look right. Now, let's say it looks beautiful. It's not tampered with, it looks like a brand new machine. Guess what? Maybe there's a Bluetooth skimmer inside. So no matter how good your eyes are and how good you check that machine out, guess what? You may not see it. That's scary. That's really scary. And we even developed some tools that actually go down into the neck of the actual credit card to see, we detect if there's a second read head basically. It's real simple. So it's a green light, red light. A few $100, you stick it in there. It beeps if there's a skimmer placed in there. If it's clean, it gives you a green light. Now, that's good if it's an old style traditional skimmer. What if it's a Bluetooth skimmer in there? Well, there it's a little different. We have a different tool. It's actually a directional antenna we had to design. Conical directional antenna, 9 dBi gain, allows us to steer. Like if you think about a Geiger counter. So now you can steer inside to which gas pump, and we actually will pair with the actual Bluetooth module. We'll establish a connection, pair with it, and we can talk to it, and then we can have it so just that Bluetooth module pings out and talks to us. And what we've done simply is identify, based upon an address inside each Bluetooth module, which the cyber criminal gangs are mostly using. Because they're cheap, they mass produce these things, they're built in China, these Bluetooth skimmers, so they're easy to identify. We've got about 6 of them that have been identified in the wild, so we'll actually scan and look for those specific addresses, and if we see that, put the unit into a special direction finding mode and actually hone in on it. And now you can walk up and say, that pump has a Bluetooth skimmer in it. Pull it out next. That one does, those are clean, move on to the next station. It's that much of an effort to actually have these task force and work with law enforcement to actually check and rid these things every day. What's another thing you could do so you don't become victim? You probably don't have a tool to scan the machine, right? If you're a consumer. What can you do?
Pay cash.
Cash. Cash is king, right? Old school, that's what I do. Because there's no easy way as a consumer to pull up and know that there's not a Bluetooth skimmer in there. No matter how good you are, it's a numbers game. Yeah, statistically, you can take the pump in the center that's closest to the attendant, has the lowest number of skimmers put in, the one that's closest to light and cameras. You can use some common sense to minimize your chance and analyze the risk so you don't get busted. But if you pull out cash, it's a lot safer. It's not convenient. And I always talk about when I present to different audiences, balancing security versus convenience. And that's really a decision in the world of cybersecurity every day we have to make. Do we want to take a moment extra and use multi-factor authentication? Well, it's a lot more secure. It's going to take an extra 30 seconds to look up that passcode and enter it in. So what do we tend to do? It's not convenient, so we shy away from it. We shy away from encryption. We shy away from backing up our data. Lots of these things we tend to do because it's convenient for us. So the balance is we hope that more and more within the industry they can develop products that are more convenient and secure. Please, go ahead.
Are there contactless skimmers yet?
That's a good question. In fact, that bothered me for a while. And I can go into a long discussion going all the way back about credit cards and security. And maybe we can just briefly touch on it. But really to answer your point, no, there's not a lot. There's very little. Part of the problem, and I don't want to get into the world of politics and red tape, but if there's not a federal law and there's not a mandate to put security into things, it doesn't typically happen because there's a cost involved. So in other words, if you had to take the 1 million+ gas pumps out there and upgrade them to more secure payment methods, it ain't gonna happen. And if it does, when there's a mandate, it's gonna take years to happen. I believe it was last October the mandate took effect, where they're saying now stations gotta start updating to put in more secure payment. And when I say more secure payment, what does that usually mean? Typically it means chip and pin. So let's back up for a second here. Who here has chip and pin in their wallet or their purse? Be honest. I do. Right? Probably all of us. Who here, when they go to the store, I don't know what your store is here, Wawa, Quick Check, or whatever you do, you take your card, you put it in the front of the machine, right? You all put it in the front of the machine now perpendicular, so it can read the chip. And then who's entering a pin in? Oh, wait a second. You just said you all had chip and pin cards. Do you really have chip and pin cards? Yeah, the chip and pin cards, but you're not entering a pin, right? We talk about security is achieved in layers, like we do multi-factor authentication, two-factor authentication, additional layer of security. Very important. Yet you all have chip and pin cards, but you're not entering a pin in. Well, what are you really using? Chip and signature. That's really what you're implementing, chip and signature. In other words, I can take my chip and pin card or my issuing bank, stick it into any point of sale terminal, and now I can sign Mickey Mouse, and they validate, yep, I'm Mickey Mouse, and the transaction goes through. Does that seem very secure to you? It's not. Please, go ahead.
So I lived in the UK for a while, and they did have chip and pin.
Yes.
So what is the difference? Because it's, the technology exists within the POS systems that we're using. What's the reason that we're not using the pin along with the chip?
Great question. It comes down, unfortunately, to the old $90. And in the case of what you mentioned, the United States is decades behind in security. I hate to say that, living here, but it's true. If you go to the UK, you go to Canada, you go to many countries around the globe, they implement security along with credit cards much better. Ironically, who has the best liability for credit card fraud? The United States. So if you're compromised in the UK when you were over there, it's hard to get your money back. In the US, it's real easy because the US wants you to spend your money on credit card and pay interest rates and so on and so forth. So the system is backwards. It's throw money at the wrong thing. So instead of spending money and implementing security properly, it's done backwards. Now let's take a step back. Let's go back 2013. Do you guys remember when the headlines all went crazy? Target breach, right? Credit card. I remember that day very well. That night I was sitting there with my wife, who happens to love Target and shops there every week. I said, oh great, we're gonna be compromised. And sure enough we were. Next morning I got a phone call. I don't know what it started, I think at 4 a.m. I had 5 interviews that day. I'm close to New York City, so I have to go in and off and weigh in on different breaches. That's when it really kicked in. 5 different major news networks I had to hit all in one day. CNN, Bloomberg, Fox, down the whole channel. I was like, what happened? How did this happen? What could we have done? This and that. The one thing nobody really wanted to hear, nobody really does today, but I'll say it anyway. Back in 2013, a little prior to that, when the whole Target breach started to unfold, 2014 and 15, we learned about all the details of it. Target actually was the first to adopt chip and pin technology. They actually went and did a pilot and spent tons of money testing, proved, guess what, it works, it's more secure. The negative side, to your point, it slowed people down at the register. It wasn't as fast. So now, again, convenience or security, what do you want to choose? Money, man, convenience, that's what happened, unfortunately. They abandoned the whole project, so they quickly disbanded, wasted a lot of money in doing all the R&D research to prove that it actually worked, but they went for the money. Did they pay for it? I think so. Brand damage, right? Just alone. We're still talking about it today, years later. So it helps to put things in perspective, the importance of, if you have a small business, to apply security within reason, it can make a difference between your survival and your failure sometimes. A lot of people don't realize that, but it really does make sense to properly deploy security and use it. Now, the mandate happened with the laws that if all the retail's locations didn't update to new chip and pin technology by a certain date, and this again was an October something date a few years ago, if it didn't happen, then there was a liability shift. So now you've got bank and issuing merchant. It basically goes down to the retailer. So if you don't update and there's a breach or a problem, you're held liable, then you're gonna pay it. So guess what happened? The spend happened and everybody suddenly updated chip and pin. So they have the ability to accept it, they just don't implement it, that's all. So it's kind of a backwards conversation in some ways. Please, go ahead.
Working in the industry, I've heard a lot of chat about reputation damage, reputation damage, reputation damage. I'm looking at Target's stock price and they're at record high.
Yeah.
So is there really a long-term reputation damage and therefore an actual monetary cost to the companies?
Yeah, there actually is. In fact, I did an article, it appeared in the Huffington Post a few years ago, and I talked just about that. The specifically, I got into detail. If you do a search on the internet, you can find it. I talked about the brand damage, what's inflicted, and who are all the parties involved in it. Now, in the case of a Target, the interesting thing is they're a huge brand that was growing, so put them out in the news a lot. But then what happens is over time, people tend to forget, they get a little complacent. And where does the money often come from for a large public company? It's the public. So again, who's paying for it? People are buying shares of it, right? Did they take a hit? Did they take a loss? Did they have a lot of problems? Yeah, class action lawsuits, so on and so forth. Cost them a lot of money. In the end, though, did it tarnish their brand? I think it did for a couple years. I think they actually came out pretty good. Let's contrast that, because that's a really good point. Think about this. You guys remember, I think it was 2 years later, JP Morgan, when they were compromised. Now here you are, different sector, we're talking financial sector. And they suffered a terrible data breach. The difference is, in my opinion, they came clean right away, because they said, we were breached, we were compromised. Here's what happened, here's how it happened, here's what we're going to do about it. Oh, by the way, we're going to commit $500 million to upgrade our security. Here's probably the strongest bang from a security posture out there. And they said, we're breached, we're compromised, here's what's happened. We're going to go out and spend, over the next couple of years, $500 million to upgrade our security. Was their brand tarnished? I don't think that much. Despite the rumors and stories, breach and compromise, all that other stuff, they came out pretty good. So it does have different effects for different companies, and I think that's important to realize and get a better sense. Now, since we're talking about credit cards, debit cards, we're talking about skimmers, different ways that were compromised, what do you think is another method that you can use as a consumer or business owner that you could still use your credit card, but safer? What do you use? What should you use?
Keep a separate card with a low balance.
You could. It's a hybrid, you can do that, keep a separate card, it's a good point. Some people do that, limited amount. You could also contact your bank and say, hey, if a transaction is ever above this, I want to get a text and I want to approve. There's a lot of things that you kind of do. Not as convenient, but they work. What about this? What does everybody have on themselves right now? Smartphone. Digital payments. Who here uses Google Wallet or Apple Pay? Wow. Okay, so it looks like 2 or 3 people out of this whole room, and myself included. Why are we not using that? I talked to someone the other day about it and said, oh, it's not secure. I said, it isn't? I said, your credit card's more secure? Yeah, much more secure. I said, oh, that's surprising. Please.
One of the problems out here in flyover country is out of all of the shops I go to, maybe 15, 20% of them support.
Yeah, and that's it. You hit the nail on the head. That's part of the problem right there. Please, go ahead.
Well, and what's funny is you will walk up to people and they do not realize that they support it.
Right.
They don't do a good job of telling the people that work there that their machines, their terminals actually support it.
Yeah.
So there have been times where I've used it and they didn't even know it was supported.
Yeah, and that's a brilliant point there. Lack of education and understanding makes a really good point there. So educating people, it hasn't happened yet. It hasn't taken on widespread adoption. There's also a lot of misnomers about it. I hear all the time, I say, oh, I use Apple Pay, and they say, well, you're not very smart. I said, what do you mean? Well, Apple Pay was compromised. I said, well, not exactly. What was, when it first was launched, and people started adopting it and using it, what happened was the cyber criminals caught on quickly and they said, oh, okay. So, and basically, I don't know if you guys know this or not, I'll just do a high level, I won't go deep dive. How does Apple Pay or Google Pay work? It simply is a digital transaction. So it's sending a one-time encrypted, tokenized message, let's say. It's not sending your credit card information. Nothing associated to you. So it's used one time, it's token, it's encrypted. Just to simplify, it's secure. So anywhere in the ecosystem, it can't be compromised. No cyber thief can steal your credit card. Does that make sense? So now, ask yourself, where's the weak point of that? Issuing bank. So cyber criminals said, oh, I got an idea. Let's call the bank up and I'll pretend I'm Mr. Scott Schober. And now I can simply say, oh yeah, I'm signing up a credit card, which happens to be a stolen credit card over here, to my new iPhone that I just got. Oh, okay, Mr. Schober, where do you live? And what's your social security number? Great, you're all set. Here's the code. Done. Piece of cake. So they started doing that easily. So where was the weak point? Over here, the bank. That's the problem. So now they have a laundry list of more secure questions and carefully before they just quickly sign somebody up. But the headline said, oh no, Apple Pay is breached, it's not secure. So now the stigma in the industry is insecure, don't use it. You see the problem? Please go ahead.
Is there a cross-platform mobile payment system that isn't run by an advertising company?
Is there a cross
platform so I can use it on my wife's iPhone and my Android?
No. No, unfortunately.
So the only one is Google,
there's
right?
probably a bigger reason.
Yeah.
Again, not to get into tech, but the way it's handled in the world of Android versus Apple, let's just say, different ecosystems. You've got end-to-end encryption over there in Android, which is secure, this and that. Apple, end-to-end encryption on a software level, but they also have a secure enclave, which is hardware that adds a layer of hardware encryption in there too. So it's kind of like apples to oranges, and it's not real, they don't play together real well. So it makes it difficult for the world of security and credit card processing and things like that. Just to make, when you think about a credit card and you process it, there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes when you dig into it. The fact that it works to me is amazing enough. But the fact that it's so complex, some of the things, helps you to see how cyber criminals can take advantage of that, right? So again, when we get back to this concept of skimmers, just to reflect upon that a moment again, if you think about it, eventually, if we can get that mag stripe off of our credit cards, and we can really use chip and pin or like the payment methods, near field communication, we bring our digital wallets toward the terminal, do the near field communication, short distance, different frequency, that's secure, encrypted. We can do some amazing things and still be secure and have convenience at a cost. So it's kind of balancing all of that in. I see it coming in the future. It's exciting. I don't think it's there yet. A lot of people talk to me often, and I feel a lot in the space also with cryptocurrency, and that's the answer. I'm not a firm believer in that yet, that it's going to be coming that quick, only because of the sheer amount of stuff associated to cryptocurrency and cyber criminal gangs and the problems associated to it. Kind of a different subject, a different problem there for sure. Just to show a couple more pictures and some of the stuff that I've been involved with and looking at different types of skimmers here. And I always thought it was interesting when I went for training and really understanding, and then got to kind of cross train and teach others. If you look to that far picture there, inside of a gas pump, do you start to understand why it's difficult to find a skimmer? It's a rat's nest in a lot of these gas pumps. Not all, but some of them are almost impossible to be able to pinpoint it out. In fact, when I was in Florida after a long hot day, working with the task force and law enforcement, we were going through the machine. They're quickly going through them, and I'm looking with interest because I kind of knew what I was looking for. And toward the very end, it was almost the last machine we were inspecting. I said, guys, stop a second. I said, you missed something over here. There's a skimmer in that machine. Like, no. And they went through, no, I don't see nothing. I don't see. 3 or 4 more guys came over and looked. I said, there's a skimmer in there. Sure enough, moved some stuff, secretly hidden. I just caught it over the corner of my eye. It's that hard to look at. So here you got people who are doing this every day, going through, know where to look and how to look. And I found kind of a hybrid solution skimmer there. Just somebody that was going on training for the first day. So it's that hard to identify them. So you really get the sense of how bad a problem it is. Now, oftentimes, if we talk about ATMs, it's slightly different. I should just bring up this point as well, just so you can kind of reflect upon it. We talked about how easy it is to get into a gas pump, right? Obvious reasons, key. Listen, ATM, is it easy to open up your local ATM here in Iowa? No, not as easy. So a little bit different techniques are used. Now, I should say this. Now, I bought a whole bunch of ATMs when I was doing research on this and took them apart to understand and learn it. The part that's kind of fascinating with an ATM machine is the safe that holds the money. The safe in there, and this is pretty true of all ATM machines, it takes you about 3 hours just to drill a small 1/4-inch hole with a good carbide bit. 3 hours. That's a good hammer trying to get in there. So you start to ask yourself, what did cyber criminals do? Did they come up with the ultimate thing to get into the safe? No! But what's on top of an ATM? Most ATM machines, you have the paper dispenser where the checks go into the drawers and everything else. What tends to be the weak point in an ATM machine? They always run out of the paper for the receipts. And the top of the machine you can open up. I thought it was funny when I bought all these different ATM machines. I didn't want to mix the keys up, but I had a couple of the same brands. And I tried a key on one, it worked on another. I said, how could this be? This is like the world of gas pumps again. They have some generic keys for ATM machines for the top of it. Now again, it doesn't give you access to the safe, but I didn't need access to the safe if I'm a cyber criminal. I just needed to know where I could place my Bluetooth skimmer. Oh, and there's a connector right there. It's labeled in the power and everywhere. You start to see the problem? So it's much easier than I ever thought to get inside a typical ATM machine and place a Bluetooth skimmer. A little bit different in that sometimes if you're at a bank, it's bolted into the wall, there's cameras, there's lights, those are harder to get into. They're going to typically use a different type of skimmer where you go, a deep skimmer where you get down the neck where your card goes in, or super flat like some of the pictures I showed. Or they're going to take a bezel and put it over the other bezel, that type of skimmer there, not a Bluetooth skimmer. But if they can open that top up, just about every time they put a Bluetooth skimmer in there, because they never have to come back again. And it works well. So if you're using ATMs, the ones you want to be cautious about, say you're in a convention center like this, and there's a small little kiosk ATM machine in the corner, and it's got maybe a generic key or an access door or means they can get in there. I tell you what, my battery-powered Sawzall works well too. Just go in the top, pop a hole, whoop, take it out, put the Bluetooth skimmer in, and then I take a big giant sticker and write, this machine is secure or something on the side, whatever, to cover the hole I made. So you see how easy it is to get into these things and actually place the hardware in there. So we want to be very mindful. Again, as consumers, we're not going to be able to identify those things unless we do a full inspection. We're not doing that. We're trying to get a quick $20 to buy pizza. So use caution for any type of kiosk skimmers. If you're in the city, got to be careful. Funny story, when we were developing our tool for testing skimmers and ATMs, we had a crew, we gave them out to each employee. We would go around to different ATMs and test it to see if there were skimmers. Well, about 3 weeks after we did all of our testing, we improved the product, so on and so forth, I get law enforcement shows up at our building. And they say, are you the owner? I said, yeah, can we talk to you, okay? They take me aside, and they got a guy's like holding his gun here, the other guy's here, and the other guy's got handcuffs. I said, is there a problem? And they're like, well, we got this license plate, we got these photos, and they had a whole file from 3 weeks from all of the banks that recorded us testing. We weren't too smart. We didn't call ahead, I guess, and get permission to test. We thought, well, we'll just go in, test real quick to see if there's skimmer, move on. All that's being recorded. So it was kind of funny when they sat down with all the evidence and said, what are you doing? I said, oh, we're testing our product here. See, we're looking for skimmers. And that's pretty cool, let me try it. And fortunately, we didn't get arrested or anything else, but it does tell you that ATMs have good security. They have cameras, and they work closely with law enforcement, do a good job. But it is hard. It's very hard to catch these bad guys because they know which machines to target, and that's part of the problem. Eventually, they could get caught, though. Please, go ahead.
So in terms of, the process side and not just the technology side, what are banks doing at this point to say, like, we are responsible for going to our ATMs every day and having an employee wiggle it a little bit just to see what happens? Or, because there's other things they could do in terms of either monitoring or checking things.
That question, you would assume they would do the best job they can, test the machines every day, so on and so forth. I can't say that is the case. I can say for some banks, I can't name them, but some banks that we have that are customers, they will traditionally buy 20 or 30 of our tools, and then they'll have us actually train the employees. And actually every morning, and as the bank closes, they actually test each ATM to make sure there was no skimmers that were placed at any time or through the night. And that's very common, and a lot of it's a train. We actually built even because it was so difficult to support and train different groups between law enforcement, national weights and measures, banks. We built a box that's got a skimmer built in. So we built a skimmer into one side of a point of sale terminal, and one that's green and one that's red, basically. So we hit it and we trained them. We built an actual training box to teach people how to identify, so they know what to visually look for, but also they know how to actually test it with a simple little tool that we have. It's a good point, though. I wish more people would do that. If all the banks did what they probably should do, I probably would be standing here and be on a beach somewhere retired right now. But not enough money is spent there for security, unfortunately. And part of the reason they say, well, it's covered. Liability will cover it. Consumers will cover it. Make those fees, because that's what the ATMs do. They're really a fee-generating type of thing. The other problem is I've learned many of the ATMs are now outsourced to a third party that actually maintains them, loads the money, provides the security. And they may have, like by us, we have one customer and they've got about 1,000 ATMs in New Jersey, New York. And they say, oh, the banks are so cheap they won't spend a dime. For us to just check for skimmers, that maybe they pay us 50 cents to $1 a day. I'm thinking, ooh, that's all they would spend to get something that could potentially take thousands of dollars of consumers' money out? That's concerning. But it helps, again, it is reality. You have to look at reality, but it's a great question. Unfortunately. I'm going to tell you a quick, oh, please, go ahead.
So you've been talking about the banks and their ATMs. Have you had any interest from Shell, Citgo, the big gas companies? At least for their stations, and having the ability to test those?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we have, I can't mention who it is, but we've had some that have thousands of stations approach us, and more of the, it's ironic, the companies that are tied with convenience store and gas pumps. Why? I kind of learned, if somebody goes to the gas pump and they realize and trace it back, that's where my card was compromised, they don't go there to shop at the convenience store. So it's a money issue again. You follow the money for all this, you can find the answer, unfortunately. So they spend the money, the larger brands, and you guys all know them, we all use them, that have that combination gas pumps, convenience store, they will spend more money and buy tools and training and inspect and rid the skimmers quicker. But remember, again, the goal is, on other stations I've come across too, here's the irony of it. One station we talked to, and he goes, oh yeah, we get skimmers all the time. Oh, what do you do with them? What do you mean what I do with them? I throw them in a box and back, and you have about 100 of them in a box. I said, how could you do that? You can't do that, you gotta report it. I'm not gonna report that. Law enforcement will come in here and shut me down. I can't make money.
Yep.
Do they care whose money they're taking? It really doesn't matter. That's part of the problem. There's no incentive for a gas station owner, an independent, a franchise, to report this. And then unfortunately, when it is reported to law enforcement, it costs money and time. They're chasing after cyber criminals, often organized. It could be a Russian cyber criminal gang. They send over 100 people to play skimmers with maps and everything else. It's very well organized. So do you want to spend money on that, or do you want to have law enforcement stop bad guys that are killing people? Right? It's tough. There's only so much resources and money and time. So it can be very frustrating. I'm going to tell you a funny story. And this is a true story, what's going on in one particular state, especially, but it's other states as well. Again, highly organized cyber criminal gangs. Talk about gas pumps and skimmers. The criminal comes up, places skimmer, Bluetooth skimmer inside the gas pump, starts collecting, from his car within 75-foot proximity of these stolen cards. Goes back, burns some fresh cards, as they call you. You can buy these. I buy them a couple hundred at a time on the internet, not that much money. And they basically have a mag stripe, and you can simply take that, your stolen credit card, you burn it onto this fresh blank credit card, you're in business. He takes that fresh credit card, of one of our stolen credit cards, because we went to that gas pump, goes back to that same gas station. This time he goes back with a large pickup truck with a 600-gallon bladder on the back of the pickup truck. What does he do? Takes my stolen credit card, buys 600 gallons of stolen, usually it's diesel, but it could be gas also, it depends on the case. Fills it up. It doesn't end there. Now he takes that stolen gas, that he took up from our credit card, goes around the corner, he makes the tanker truck, and pumps that 600 gallons of gas back into the tanker truck that then goes to that gas station and sells it back to that gas station. You see what's happening? Now you start to think about gas at $3-4 a gallon, 600 gallons. They're doing this day in, day out, day in, day out. Problem. So when I talked to you in the beginning about $6 trillion in cybersecurity breaches and damages, and then in that there's billions upon billions just because of skimmers, it seemed kind of far-fetched. But when you see what's happening in the bigger picture, billions and billions of dollars, that's only what's reported. So we start to see how big of a problem this really is. That is concerning to me. And more needs to certainly be done. Unfortunately, not enough is done there. I'm going to share one other thing that I learned in some of my research and talking with different individuals. A lot of times we focus our attention so much in a particular area, we miss the obvious. What am I talking about? Look at that middle picture where I got the arrow there pointing. So you're going to a bank. Did you ever go into those? Your bank is Bank XYZ, ATMs, well-lit security cameras, and you say, this is secure. I go to this one all the time. And now to get in after hours, oftentimes there's a glass vestibule to get in. Where do you stick your debit card in to get in? Right outside the door, there's a little slot. What do? You stick your card in here. It's a solenoid that opens the door and unlocks it. So they know, okay, it's a legitimate customer, open the door, you go in. Where do you think they put the skimmer? Right there at the door. Why? It's more convenient. They don't have to get in there and get into the ATM machine. Now, guess what? They just stole your debit card information before you even stepped foot in the bank. Isn't that smart? Scary, but nobody knows this. Nobody I've ever talked to realizes this, yet it happens every single day. Please.
Do you think that there is some sort of perverse incentive, I guess you could say, from the bank's perspective, not to educate customers? Because I think there could be some really easy warning signals, like watch out for skimmers, or essentially you can put a sticker on an ATM that goes, hey,
Right.
be aware, but that they're not doing it because the consumer would perceive the responsibility of skimmers to be the bank to protect them, and they don't want to front the money for that.
I think it's a great point. and I'll play devil's advocate, I'll say for the gas pump industry, they tried that. What they did was they actually had national weights and measures, and they still do this. They go and inspect each pump. Eventually, every pump gets inspected, I think in the course of about 2 years throughout the United States. They open them up, they inspect, make sure there's no skimmers and other things too. And they put a security seal on there, a sticker that said this pump is inspected and secured to date. And to a consumer, they were told, if you see that seal, it's safe to use. So now, I'm a cyber criminal. And what do? On the dark web or on eBay, I sell rolls of stickers that say this pump was inspected and secured. So I place my skimmer in, and I place it up there, and now suddenly, I'm in business. Now I'm having people drawn to this machine because it looks like it's secure for this cheap 5-cent sticker. That's part of the problem, unfortunately. It's a good point. I brought that up myself years ago while researching this, and it bothered me to no end. There's got to be something. Okay, now here's a silver lining in some of it. Some of the stations are starting to upgrade. That's good. It's coming really slow and taking a long time, but it is starting to happen, just like point-of-sale terminals for our chip and signature are happening. So it's better security, but it's not 100% secure. And again, nothing is. But if you go to Costco, I don't know if you guys have Costco here in Iowa. Costco actually is one of the few companies, and they do sell a lot of gas, and they sell it at a good rate. They get the standard gas pumps in, and they spend a lot of money ripping off all of the locks and putting in their own locks. So therefore, the chance of finding a skimmer in a Costco pump is minimal, unless it's an inside job or something else, for what that's worth. Nobody ever talks about that, but to me, if I'm a consumer, that's good information to know, especially if I have a Costco card, and I think they're doing it right. So again, sometimes spending the money in the right areas makes sense. So they should certainly be applauded for that, I think. Just kind of in closing, I briefly want to just touch the surface of this. Again, I might be presenting later and I can delve in deeper here if need be. I just wanted to mention, when credit cards and debit cards are stolen, just because you steal it doesn't mean you have an audience to sell that to or a customer base. How do you sell the stuff? Well, that's the part that's the easy part for the cyber criminals. They're using what's called the dark web. Have you guys, I'm assuming that as a cybersecurity audience, you know what the dark web is? If I just show of hands, you've heard of it, you're somewhat familiar? Okay, most everybody is here. So just in general, the internet, the surface web where we all work, doing Google searches and visiting different websites through our browser and such, is about 4.5 billion websites that are indexed by different search engines. So the surface web represents roughly 0.2% of the internet, right? So that tells you what is below the surface web is so much bigger and so much wider. And this little iceberg is the very common thing that's kind of been associated with the dark web that many people will often get used to, which depicts it, I think, goes so well, the Google, Wikipedia and stuff up at the surface, and all the stuff in the deep and the dark web below there. And again, those are really, just to say it simply, it's unindexed underneath there. So it's hard to find these unique sites, and they're repositories. It's not all bad stuff. Everybody associates, oh, the dark web is bad, and not necessarily. It could be repositories of databases and patient information and all kinds of stuff out there. But it's not indexed the same way as the surface. So therefore, to go into the dark web, you have to know the specific address to get in there, and the means to get in there typically use what's called a Tor browser and the Tor network, designed by the United States Naval Research Group, I believe, a number of years ago. So it could help people communicate anonymously and securely. Dissidents, reporters, anyone else can use that. Cyber criminals also can too, because it's free. And it's very wonderful because it allows you to do things anonymously. It'll bounce around IP traffic around the globe so nobody can pinpoint exactly where you are, which is important. The data is encrypted, so again, it protects the user there, which again is important if you're doing legal things. Now, if you're doing illegal things, it's a protection too. Unfortunately, that's part of the challenge. So on the dark web, a lot of these bad guys learn, wow, I can hide information here. I could work with other cyber criminals. I can buy and sell guns, kids, drugs, stolen credit cards, so on and so forth. That's a huge problem. It's very successful, and law enforcement's been working hard and done a great job in slowly taking down these sites. You probably heard of Silk Road and Silk Road 2 and so on and so forth. Pretty fascinating. I've done a couple of these projects working with different media groups. In this particular case, it was actually CBS. What we did was I went on the dark web, did research for a period of time, collected masses of stolen credit card information, identities, social security numbers, breach information, and then I worked with law enforcement and then they actually went out and contacted the individuals and literally kind of knocked on their door and said, excuse me, do you know your credit card is on the dark web? I'm like, what are you talking about? And then helped them remediate. So it was a bigger project, kind of sting project, but it was kind of cool because I got to actually collect all that information. So that was really neat to be able to actually see it. Unfortunately, most of the people that were contacted had no clue their information was out there, had no idea how it got out there. Most likely it was a skimmer that took it, or they were buying something online, they were going on sites that they probably shouldn't have, their information was compromised and out there. But it's interesting when you get behind the scenes and understand how fragile the whole system is, yet every single one of us here has a credit card or debit card in our wallet or purse and uses it probably on a weekly basis. That's scary. So just before you quickly shove that card, and just stop and think. That's what I encourage people to do, because it's very easy to be compromised. Myself personally, when I was targeted and hacked my company a few years ago, I think it was 11 times my card was compromised. Personally, the company's close to that, and then I had debit cards also for each. So I've been through the process. It's painful. Suffered the whole DDoS attack, Twitter account takeover, $65,000 stolen from my checking account. I was targeted, and any of us could be targeted. Again, I'm a cybersecurity expert. What does that tell you? Nothing's 100%. I'm sorry, nothing is. Any one of us can easily be targeted, can be compromised. It's fairly easy to do. So I just encourage you, don't give up. But implementing best security practices is something that really does make a difference. Because what's it going to do? It's going to deter the cyber criminal to move on to the next target. That's what's important. That's really what's important. There is out right after this, after we conclude, I'm happy to answer anybody's questions if you have any more. I'm going to do a little book signing. You get a free copy of my book, Cybersecurity is Everybody's Business, out in, I think, the main lobby that they're going to do that there. So I welcome you to stop by, I'll give you a signed copy, and happy to hear any of your horror stories in the world of cyber or answer any questions. And I have two other books. The first book that's been out a little bit longer, Hacked Again, that's my story of being hacked as a company and personally what I went through, the things I learned in the process. And then more recently, I released another book, Senior Cyber, and that's really dealing with aged parents and grandparents, trying to educate them. I was so frustrated that I could not find any good information that talked at their level. It all talked down to them and talked in tech jargon, and it just got people more confused. So I said, that's it. I'm going to write a book that's big font so everybody could read it without their glasses, and share tips throughout and explain things without getting techie on it. So hence the launch of Senior Cyber there. A fun project, and especially interviewing older people and understanding their frustrations with technology and security there. So anyway, feel free to visit my website there. Just simply my name, scottschober.com. If you're interested in a book, please come out there, get a complimentary copy. Thanks to this event for putting this on, and again, supplying books for everybody, and appreciate the time and listening. Thank you again.